Welcome to the Celtic Star Podcast, a Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and this week I'm joined by Kevin Graham.
You're right, Paul. What's happening?
It's always a pleasure to see you, Kevin. We're going to have a special guest on, as normal, later on in the podcast, but before we do that, our eagle-eyed observers may have noticed that we have a new name, the Celtic Star Podcast. So could you explain to everybody what the development has been over the last week or so?
When we started this podcast, obviously we didn't know where it was going to go, if it was going to be a success. But our aim was always eventually to get our own website, do more content, and we've been really lucky enough that we've been afforded, the Celtic Star has afforded us that opportunity probably far quicker than me and you expected, Paulie. There's going to be a book on, there's going to be an increase in content. It's going to be a great place to go to get Celtic news every day. There's going to be content from writers that we all know, new writers, young, old writers. We've got Jim Craig on board, which is absolutely fantastic.
The former dentist.
The former dentist, Jim Craig. I think he won a few medals playing football. I'm no... So he tells us anyway, We've got loads of things planned, and the Celtic Star's going to give us that platform to do it. Really exciting. It's been really quite a busy week. We've had the success of the Neil Lennon episode. Neil was fantastic.
It was a great night.
It was a brilliant night. So it's busy, exciting, scaring. It's a bit scary to tell you the truth at times. But
if I was to describe it as a scene out of a movie, it would be that scene in Wallace and Gromit when the dog's on the train and he's putting the train track down as the train is hurtling towards wherever the destination is. That's kind of been what it's been like with this podcast. We had a plan, but it has escalated pretty quickly, hasn't it?
I can't say we had a plan. We had an idea.
Loosely use that term.
We had a loose idea, but the only reason that we're at the point that we're actually at is because of the people listening. Mm-hmm. The amount of guys, girls, dogs, cats that actually listen to us on a weekly basis, who have gave us great feedback. It's all down to them, and we want to do more. Mm-hmm. So the Celtic Star's going to give us that platform to do that, and we'll just need to see where it takes us.
Yeah, it's quite exciting. I mean, a couple of weeks ago we were at the Royal Concert Hall backstage, sitting with Neil Lennon and Chris Sutton, ready to go out and interview the two of them, safe in the knowledge that we would have two outstanding interviews in the can. Unfortunately,
I never pressed record.
There was a wee issue. I wasn't going to blame you, Kevin, but there was a wee issue with the Chris Sutton interview, because it was a cracker for anybody who was there. It was a great interview, but I think the Neil Lennon one has really just raised the bar in terms of what we've been doing. And it, the thing that I hope the listeners have picked up is just how friendly and humorous and engaging Neil was. He was like that backstage as well, wasn't he?
He was brilliant. So was Chris. Mm-hmm. I think anybody that meets Chris kind of knows his BT Sport persona as a persona, mm-hmm. and he can be a bit short with you.
He did describe me as David Tanner on stage in front of 2,000 people.
Got a point, yeah.
Cheers.
I'm talking about the suit that you had on.
Mm-hmm.
But again, Neil's been fantastic, but he's only at the top of a long line of guests who have been absolutely fantastic. John McLaverty, Phil Differ,
that was brilliant.
Kevin Miles doing the session, brilliant. Jim Craig, absolutely fantastic. James Allen, Stephen Sullivan talking about Sean Fallon.
That was great.
We've had so many highlights in the 6 months that they've been here, mm-hmm. and me and you wanted to develop it. And what was really good about getting the opportunity to develop it is all that stuff we've got on the list, all those people that we wanted to interview, we've now maybe got the opportunity to interview it. And again, I can't emphasise enough, that's all down to the guys listening, downloading, week in, week out. And now, I know the Celtic Star, the website's still work in progress.
In its infancy.
But what we're going to say to you is, please sign up. Mm-hmm. Please register an interest in it, and we'll see where that goes. We enjoy doing it, it's magic, but it's the reaction of people listening to the stories, and that it makes it all worthwhile.
It does. I mean, that's the thing, we're not saying that as a cliche, when you get a bit of feedback, when people come to you on Twitter and say they've enjoyed it, it makes it all worthwhile. And the thing with the Celtic Star, which I'm a great supporter of, is the fact that we are going to focus 100% on Celtic Football Club. I'm not criticising...
And the supporters.
And the support. And I'm not criticising anybody else who covers other subjects. It's just that this is what we're going to be doing. This is going to be our direction. And we do have a huge list of guests that we would still like to speak to. And I think that the success of some of the shows latterly is allowing us to approach maybe bigger names and getting them on the show as well. Now, the guest that we've got this week, Kevin, I think anybody who listens to the show regularly or has even tuned in once or twice will know that we're both massive music fans. And the figure that we've brought in today is the one and only Clint Boon from the Inspiral Carpets. Could you explain why we've invited Clint onto the show?
Basically, the Celtic support sing the 10 in a row song about Brendan Rodgers to the tune of a 1990 hit by the Inspiral Carpets. Clint wrote this song, and we thought it would be great because the Celtic Star's tagline is "This is how it feels" for the first podcast on the Celtic Star to speak to the man who wrote "This is how it feels." Just so happens he was a massive hero of mine when I was growing up. Just so happens that he's got more stories than Penguin Books. Just so happens that he gave Noel Gallagher his big break. He knows Manny, he knows everybody in Manchester. Mm-hmm. He's a really engaging guy, and we thought, why not? He agreed to do it. And he's not a massive football fan, so if you're sitting here thinking you're going to get masses of football chat, you're not. You're just going to get a guy who wrote a song that's a massive staple of the Celtic support at this precise moment in time.
And he wrote that in the bedroom in his mum and dad's house, and it now gets chanted out every other week by 60,000 Celtic fans. What a feeling. So yes, we have this week Clint Boon with a Celtic State of Mind. It was the greatest season of modern day football in terms of Celtic. You know, it was an invincible season, it was a treble-winning season, and the soundtrack to that is Inspiral Carpets, right? So what we wanted to talk to you about that because our podcast is big on music, culture, football, fashion, and we just try and encapsulate everything that Glasgow has, you know, the city and the spirit of Glasgow. So that's a tenuous link, but it's also because we wanted to speak to you about your memories of the Inspirals and all the various wee anecdotes that you've put out already on Storytime with Boon, which I loved, by the way. I really loved that podcast.
Thank you. I'm hoping to bring it back one day.
I hope you do. I mean, I've listened to each of the episodes more than once. It's one of the ones, Clint, where you go back to it, and there's a few stories in there that had me physically laughing out loud, and there was a few stories where I had a wee tear in my eye. You know, it was great. So well done on that, and it was quite inspirational for us. We're a relatively new podcast. We're only 33 episodes in, Clint. So we've spoken to Paul Gallagher and James Allen, and you're the third music-related guest. So welcome to the show. It's a pleasure.
I'm in good company.
Yeah, you are in good company.
I know Paul and James really well, so they're both lovely people.
Yeah, well, James was so passionate when he was chatting because obviously he's a massive Celtic fan as well, and as is Paul. But I found it funny the other day. I was listening back to the show you did with Alfie Bow, and he pointed out that Paul Gallagher was in the living room when you were breakdancing and you broke your ribs.
I'd forgotten that Paul was there when we were doing the break.
Yeah.
I forgot that Paul was there. He was at the house that day. It's funny, man.
Oh, well, I'll tell you what, it's something you may already have done or you may be planning, but all those stories surely, Clint, will be in a book someday.
To be honest with you, I transcribed them first. They're written out in story form anyway, ready for the book.
Yeah.
So that's, that will definitely happen at some point.
Well, that's going to be a cracker, because as I say, I've laughed and I've cried listening to your stories, and they've been tremendous. Now, what I would like to ask you first of all, Clint, is going back to the podcast, I learned that your boys were starting a band back in 2016.
It was basically Oscar, our 14-year-old, is an amazing bass player. And he started playing at home, and then the other guys just started joining in. We've got the drums, obviously, and one of the other kids from the neighbourhood came out. So for a little while they had a little band and they were jamming, but it's just become Oscar now. Oscar's crashing ahead with his music. He's got a band that he plays every Thursday night, but he's just a really fluent bass player. He's incredible on the bass. The other two guys are into all sorts, including music, but they're into everything from skating, photography, and all sorts of things. So we're then looking at, we homeschool our kids, so we can sort of, whatever interest they get, we can really encourage it and help them to develop it, you know what I mean? As long as the academic sort of subjects like English and maths and that, we make sure they're doing that stuff. Yeah. But around that, you know, the 11-year-old Hector's just got really into golf recently, so
right.
He's having golf lessons now as well as other things.
Oh, outstanding. I mean,
it's a nice thing, but yeah, in terms of the band, I think it'll happen again in time. I think we'll all just start jamming together at some point, and I'm convinced we'll end up in a band at some point.
And you're secretly hoping that they do as well, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. I've seen the benefits of it. I'm not talking about the financial side. I mean, I've felt how good it is to see the world, you know, just because you've written some songs and you suddenly see the world with your friends. It's a lovely voyage, you know, so I'm hoping that my kids will have a similar sort of experience, really. And if not, if they don't get into music, it's fine. I'm sure they'll all be creative. They already are very creative in their own ways.
Brilliant.
My 11-year-old Hector, he's really into photography, so at the moment, so that's another one of his passions.
Well, I was interested to hear that it was something you were interested in as well, wasn't it, Clint, in your earlier days?
So I still am as well. I mean, I've never been I've never really studied photography in terms of, you know, all the technicalities of it. Well, I've just always had an eye for, you know, a nice picture. I've constantly got a camera in my back pocket or in my bag, so I do take a lot of pictures, and then thankfully a lot of those pictures were back in the day when we were having the first steps on our career, you know, and having people like Noel hanging out when it was just a kid, you know, just to set out here. We've got a lot of nice photographs of Noel and others, you know, from back in the day. So
brilliant.
I'm so glad that I did photograph everything that's happened since the 1970s. Really.
Yeah, and they'll be good for the book as well, Clint, when it finally arrives.
Oh yeah, there will be a book eventually.
Oh, brilliant.
That's all part of the plan. So.
Brilliant.
Was some of the pictures, Clint, used in Supersonic, the Oasis documentary?
That's right, yeah. Well, I got a call from the producers of the film saying that the Oasis lot had said check with Clint and see what he's got in terms of photographs. So yeah, I shared it with the producers, and it's nice to be part of the movie, really. It's nice that, you know, in the voiceover, Noel was really, really complimentary about us and, you know, his memories of the band and working with the band. We knew at the time he loved it, and he's often said since then that he preferred that period of his life to being in Oasis. It was less pressure. Being his Inspiral roadie gave him a lot less headaches than being the main man in Oasis, you know.
Uh-huh. I mean, I was interested as well, Clint, that on the night of the Lockerbie disaster on the 21st of December 88, you remember that night for other reasons as well, and that was the audition by Noel to be the lead singer. I mean, what's your memories of that, going back to Noel auditioning, and did he show any kind of promise as a songwriter, to your knowledge, at that time?
Well, by that point, we'd known Noel as a fan. He was, you know, to the previous 12 months or so, he'd been following around to gigs, and you know, we became friendly with him. Excuse me, and we knew he was a songwriter. He was playing us songs that he'd written, you know, on a set stage. So we knew he was a songwriter. We knew that eventually, you know, he wanted to do his own thing. And we auditioned him, as you said, on the night of the Lockerbie disaster, and we didn't really think his voice suited the band. He could sing, as we all know now, but he didn't have the kind of voice we wanted, because we'd had Stephen Holt until that point. Mm-hmm. Stephen started the band in the early 80s with Graham, and Stephen is the current singer of the Inspirals. And he's got big voices, you know, which we didn't feel that Noel was a suitable replacement for that. But we took him on as a roadie because we loved him and we just wanted to hang out with him and spend time with him. So from the night of the audition, he was with us pretty much every night, every day for the next 4 or 5 years. Mm-hmm. With us, which was, again, a nice trip. But the Lockerbie thing, the strange thing about that, or the notable thing about it, is that Ashton-under-Lyne, where we were rehearsing, it's directly on the flight path that the planes take on that route.
Right.
So while we were auditioning Noel, the plane flown over Ashton on the line, and then when I came out at the end of the rehearsal that night, or at the end of the jamming, I put the radio on and John Peel had just announced there'd been this disaster in Scotland, so it was just a notable moment in time for me personally, two quite extreme reasons. One being a lovely moment where we met Noel Gallagher and he entered the music industry, and then that horrific thing that happened at Lockerbie, which is completely an absolute tragedy. So it was a memorable night for two very extreme reasons, really.
Yeah, I mean, there's some great stories on your podcast, Storytime with Boon, regarding Noel and your antics when you're touring America, etc., and stealing fans out the back of vans and all that kind of stuff. But there was also an interesting tale that all the various members of Oasis at one time or other had helped Inspiral Carpets out with a bit of roadieing and driving and stuff. What's your memories of a young Liam and Bonehead?
Well, at the time, my memories then of Liam was he was very quiet. It's like that. Noel was obviously part of our team. He was the eldest brother as well. But it was sort of Liam. I think Liam felt a bit in Noel's shadow. He was part of the inner sanctum of the Inspirals. So when Liam did come to gigs, which was quite often, he'd be in the dressing room, but he'd be quite quiet in the corner where Noel would be doing all the holding court, if you like. So my earliest memories of Liam was this really lovely little young lad, really good looking, and just a nice geezer. And I think he came out of his shell when Oasis eventually got signed to Creation. My memory of it, my recollection was that's when the Liam that we know today started to blossom.
Blossom, yeah.
Blossom, yeah. Like a big massive blossom. So Liam, I loved him from day one. He's just always nothing but a warm person, and he is today. And the nice thing is, I think now in 2018, the British public, the record buying public, the music consumer, they can see now what one guy is because it's coming out now. He's able to show his true soul, which I don't think he was in Oasis.
He's back on form, and he's got that wee glint in his eye again, It's magic to see.
I think just with Oasis, it's hard to communicate your true inner self when the tabloids are only interested in, if you spat on stage in America, if you headbutted a photographer in Australia. That's what Liam was defined by. Those stories were what defined Liam back in the 90s. But we all knew that wasn't him. It's like inside he's a very soft-hearted man, you know what I mean? And I think now he's able to put that across in his interviews and on stage because he's not competing against the tabloids. He's not competing against his brother. It's like it's just. I think we're eventually we're finally seeing the true, soul of Liam Gallagher, which is lovely. And I think it's coming across in his music as well. The tracks on the new album, the ones that he's written are absolutely beautiful, heart-wrenching songs. I think, and it's nice that he's finally getting the recognition for being a warm human being. Yeah,
he's definitely expressing himself differently now over the interviews, Clint, and one that I heard with you.
You asked me about Bonehead, he's been all the way through it all, he's just been so down to earth. When they're at the peak, he was down to earth, and he is now, I still see Bonehead, and we always end up talking about DIY, because he was a plasterer, So it's just so down to earth, it's nice. And, a lot of those Mancunian icons that I know are the same, they're all... Manny is one of the most down-to-earth people you could ever wish to bump into in Tesco's, you know what I mean? He's such an ordinary guy. He's a lot wealthier now than he was at a years ago.
I mean, I was going to mention Manny because, again, going back to the really early days, Clint, you must have been quite an industrious young man building a studio in the cotton mill, and you formed a band with Manny, didn't you? What's your memories of jamming with Manny in the early days?
Well, there used to be a pub in Oldham called the Miners' Arms, and they used to have, I think every Saturday night they'd have bands on. There's one particular band that seemed to have a residency there. And they did a couple of versions. It was all Beatles, Stones, Hendrix, Kings. And I used to go and watch them. I got friendly with the drummer in the band, Chris. He was in the band for a little while. Chris Goodwin. And basically one Saturday night, he introduced me to this young lad, his mate, Gary, or Manny. And that was in I think it was late 83. And we immediately, because we all love psychedelic music, we all love the music this band were playing, all these 60s covers, and we decided then to just start jamming together. So the day after, being a Sunday, we went down to the mill that I worked in, the National Underline, and we just jammed on the shop floor. I didn't have a studio, it was just forklift trucks and welding machines, and just set all our gear up in the middle of it and started jamming psychedelic music. And a lot of it sounded like Nice as Ed the Noise Bar, and it was quite industrial, and a lot of metal things getting thrown about, and experimenting with broken glass sounds and all this kind of stuff. So it was very left field what we were doing, but we loved it. And then that's what we did every Sunday then for probably a year. We just went down to the mill and made sounds and made music. And we recorded pretty much every minute of it, which I've still got, but we never released any of it officially. And I think one day I probably will make some of that public, because I think it needs to be heard. It's quite a seminal moment in the history of Manchester music, you know, because when we separated the mill in late 84, early 1985, you know, I went off to do the Inspirals, then I went and joined the Roses, Chris went and started a band called The High. So it was like pre-Madchester. It was quite an important moment, I think, in hindsight.
Absolutely. It's great that you've still got the recordings, Clint. And
yeah, I've got the recordings. You know, I've still got the work ethic you mentioned. I think because we're all of working class families. You know, me, Maddie, Chris, the Gallaghers, they're all from working class families. So yeah, we saw our parents grafting, and that was the norm for us. You know, get out and make it happen. You know, you don't sit at home waiting for Richard Branson to knock on your door. You've got to get out and find these people, and you know, find the venues that are going to put your gigs on. So we were always good at that. The Inspirals were always, like I said, very industrious. We got out and we knocked on doors and we made it happen. And, you know, that's one of the best rock and roll lines ever written. And the old Gallagher wrote, "You've got to make it happen." It's what we all did. And it's that working class thing, I think, that you get out and work. And I was up at 7 o'clock this morning working on music in my little studio.
Brilliant.
It's very much, I'm still in that same, in the cellar. We got a studio. It's that same thing, and it's just making it happen. You know, doing some music. I've got a radio show to do in a bit. I've got kids to look after, and you know, fortunately, a lovely wife, and you know, I have a nice balance between work and family these days, which I appreciate, and I'm blessed, you know. But yeah, I'm still not the same working class bloke who gets out and does stuff.
You talk about 85, 86 there. Obviously, Madchester, as you've already mentioned, exploded 89, 90. When did you realise that the Inspirals were going to make the breakthrough, or Manchester as a city was going to make a breakthrough?
What I liked about the Inspirals journey was that from day one, you know, every week was we rose up our profile rose, or the excitement of what we're doing just became bigger. So there was never a lull. It was like from me joining in late 85, 86, early 86, you know, we made this amazing music. You know, the gigs in the local pubs suddenly became gigs in Manchester City Centre. You know, the crowds doubled in size every time we went out there. We found that there was a lot of faces from the Manchester music scene who were suddenly turning up at every one of our gigs. You know, people we looked up to. People like the Bodines at the time, and you know, bands like Laughs that we came into Cellar. They were all raving about the quality of the music we were making, and the fact that we looked different than everybody else. So that was really exciting. You know, it just felt like we were building from day one. And then it didn't seem to be long before people like John Peel picked up on us and started raving about us, and that suddenly escalated things to a different level, because in those days when John Peel played an unsigned band from Oldham, you know, on a Wednesday night, by Thursday morning, Friday afternoon, you were getting offers from record companies. You know what I'm saying?
Was that on the back sorry to interrupt here, was that on the back of Dung 4, the demo tape?
It was a bit later than that, because I did the Dung 4 demo. We sold 8,000 of those eventually. Yeah, we did the Dung 4 tape. To be honest with you, it was an album that we recorded onto cassette, and we didn't do anything with it immediately. We just sort of used it as a demo. And then eventually we started putting records out on Playtime Records, the local Manchester label. And the first record was the Keep the Circle Around, and that's what John Peel picked up on immediately. And that's when things escalated, you know, to the point where we're getting record deal offers within days, it seemed to me at the time. You know, we were suddenly getting invited down to London to meet CBS or RCA, whoever it was. The Dunk 4 thing, we put that out a little bit later, because I think we started having problems with people putting out bootlegs of the Inspirals.
Right.
On cassette tapes. And what we did, then we realised we had this really nicely recorded 11-song demo, Dunk 4. So we released it then as an official release on cassette only. And that's what we sold. I think we sold 8,000 of them. And in those days, that was like incredible, we're still an unsigned band technically, but we just sold 8,000 cassettes at £3 a time. The nice thing about it is about 3 years ago we actually put Dunk 4 out again on vinyl for the first time ever, which was one of my proudest, well, not proudest moments, one of my most exciting moments was getting Dunk 4, the vinyl version with all the original photographs I got from back in the day, because that was the album that I sat and recorded in that little studio in Ashton in the mill, on a 4-track cassette machine.
Mm-hmm.
And it just sounds amazing today.
It does sound amazing. It triggers some memories, as you say, getting the record, and it takes you back to that time when it was being recorded.
Absolutely, yeah. Absolutely. And, going back to that era, so it was happening pretty quick. People got on board, suddenly we were getting gigs abroad, and from there it just went, that was it. It's like, we just got bigger and bigger and bigger. It just went through the roof, really. And we toured the world for 4 or 5 years. Every year we went completely around the globe, which was nice. We had 8 records, I think, Top of the Pops 7 times, I think, which back then was a measure of real success. And then eventually probably by 93, 94, we were selling less records, and then the deal with Mute Records came to an end. And that was the point where we realised we were probably going to have to do something else other than the Inspirals. We split the band up very amicably in March of 95, because we all had, we had bills to pay, we had mortgages to pay, we had kids to feed, and the Inspirals wasn't selling enough records to finance all that, so we literally just shook hands and said, see you in a bit. And then it's another 9 years before we got back together.
I mean, one of the big things that strikes me, Clint, and listening to, and I'm going to mention it again because I would say to anybody that listens to our podcast, check out Storytime with Boon, because it's brilliant for anecdotes and various stories. 1 minute you're telling us about your rabbits in the back garden, and then you tell us a story about Morrissey. It's brilliant. And one of the things that struck me, Clint, is that you've obviously got an ear for talent, and you identified people like Elbow, for example, Alfie Boe, who we've mentioned, and Cabbage, who I've seen last year in Glasgow, and you identified these bands really, really early on. I mean, is that something that you've ever considered, being the Svengali figure like your Tony Wilsons and these kind of characters?
It's something that obviously I could do it, but I don't want to do it, because it's a lot of pressure. As soon as you decide to manage a band, you become the babysitter, and you become the person that everybody's looking at to bring the money in. So I've never seriously managed a band. I'm good at pointing out who the next successful band is going to be, but I usually just hand them over to another manager, which I did with Cabbage pretty much. When I saw them, I was that excited about the potential. I just immediately phoned the best manager that I knew and said, you need to manage this band.
Yeah.
And within days he was managing them, and so far the journey's been great. They're doing good, they're building it nice. So, but yeah, I think I'm too busy. If I have nothing else to do with my time, I could probably think about managing a great band, but I'm still very busy I do radio 5 days a week. I do DJ sets 3 or 4 nights a week.
Right.
I'm writing and recording new music for various projects, and we won't school our kids. So there's a lot on my plate there,
Oh, definitely.
Well, I could have said to a band, whoever they might be, there's a band called Control. They're going. I'm currently in love with and helping out.
Right, that
the local band, and they are brilliant, but they said to me, will you manage us? I can't, I'm too busy to do it properly. I love you, I'm control you, but I can't do that man.
Too busy, sure. One of the others, Clint, that you mentioned was Liam McClare, who is the son of the iconic Celtic and Man United striker Brian McClare. I mean, with regards to how busy you are and how busy it sounds like you've always been, did you ever have time for a bit of football? And who were your team growing up?
Very much. It was Oldham Athletic. So
brilliant.
I followed them for the early 1970s. I followed them for probably 3 or 4 seasons. And then each season being amazing, and then it seemed that at the end of the season they'd be fighting against relegation. So I do really like that disappointment that football often brings. Where music does, and music usually, it's like R.E.M. have never let me down. I love R.E.M. and Gulf's never let me down, and sometimes your football team does let you down, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I think when I had that early 70s experience with all the not being great, and then punk happened in '76, and that was my rock and roll for now. That was me, that was my birth. I see it. Seeing the Sex Pistols in Manchester in 1976 was like, that was my day one. So football from that moment went right out the window. Just never really supported anybody. I love watching a great football game.
Yeah.
I listen to football talk shows because I'm interested in the culture of it and the passion, the passion that people have for it.
Yeah.
But I stopped supporting football team as such many years ago. But you mentioned This Is How It Feels is obviously the theme tune now for Celtic.
Yes.
And the story of that song is like, because I wrote that back in the late 80s. I was still living at home with my mum and dad when I wrote it. And I won't go into what inspired the song because that's sort of become a bit insignificant. But I love it that the song's now gone out and got its own life. It's like the eldest child which has gone out into the world and it's doing its own thing now. I can't control it,
Yeah.
I loved it when Manchester United adopted it 15, 20 years ago. When they were doing great, they adopted the song. They were taunting City fans with it for many seasons. And it seemed to bring United quite a lot of luck at the time. And then suddenly City started doing brilliantly. United dropped a bit and City adopted the song.
Right. And
started taunting United fans with it. And now Celtic have adopted it, and it seems to have brought them a bit of luck, if you like.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing. I know for a fact that song will go on. It'll be on the terraces for a lot of different teams for years to come. That's the way it feels. It's become a football anthem. It
has become a terrace anthem. This is a big thing. The thing with Celtic, Clint, is that the season that we adopted that has been, in the modern age, the most successful season that we've had. And in 50 years' time, when we're looking back at footage, we're going to be hearing the Inspirals being chanted out from the terraces. It's a magnificent thing. A beautiful thing.
What I like about it, it's going to sound like I'm blowing our trumpet here, which I probably have a little bit. But it's probably one of the most sung songs in the UK in this present day, because you think about the tens of thousands of people who sing it every week on the terraces. Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
It's like you're talking, I don't know, 50,000, 60,000, 70,000 people a week will be chanting that song, whether it's at United, at City, at Celtic. It's a massive thing, isn't it? So it's, to me that's a great thing to say that, that song was nothing, and then one day I sat down with a pen and paper, and then it became that song that people are still singing 30 odd years later.
When you came up with the melody line, did you realise it was like a sing-along? Even though the lyrical content of the song is maybe a bit dark, but did you realise that I've been to quite a few Inspiral Carpets gigs myself, and it gets belted out. And did you realise when you wrote it that I had that catchy quality?
I think the answer to that is it. I think when since I started writing songs, I've always written a catchy chorus. I think it's essential. I've grown up in that golden era of pop music. I was born in '59, so I grew up listening to 60s music and early 70s music and then punk. So I think I've got a really for melody. I think every time I write a song, it's always got a really catchy chorus. I didn't realise it was going to be a hit. You know what I mean? I think I probably knew at the time that the Inspirals would make it a single, but I never knew the potential of it. I never knew what it was going to, do for 30 odd years later to still be a popular song on the radio, in the clubs, on the terraces. It's just, I never knew that for a minute. But when you write a song, I knew that sentiment I wrote into that chorus, I knew that a lot of people would tap into, because it's quite a universal sentiment in it. Everybody knows what it's like to feel lonely, feel small. So it's one of those you write, it's like why Oasis is so why don't Colours?
It's like Don't Look Back in Anger.
It gets that universal. He knows how to put that universal emotion into a chorus, and I think he learned a lot of that from the Inspirals, because he did used to be very complimentary as we write these songs, and he'd listen to us, rehearsing them or recording them, and he often said to me that he always liked that bit about my songs, where there was always that optimistic bit in the chorus about, you know, we can get back on top, we can get up there. So it was always like, everything's going to be alright, and he always liked that in my songs, and I think that probably inspired him a little bit in his songwriting. I don't think that's out of place for me to say that. But yeah, it's an easy thing. I think if you put a universal feeling into a song, then people around the world will buy into it.
Now, you mentioned Top of the Pops, and Inspiral's been on Top of the Pops 7 times.
Yeah.
When you appeared on Top of the Pops doing This Is How It Feels, do you remember who you were on after?
I know Primal Scream on the same night.
Good answer. It was a Primal Scream.
Yeah. And then I know there's a couple of dodgy dance bands on as well that were popular at the time. But yeah, Primal's on the same night.
Wait, actually, that was a bit of a trick question, because I've just watched it in the Top of the Pops episode on YouTube, and This Is How It Feels went in at number 22 in the charts.
Yeah.
The Primal Scream were at 24 with Loaded.
Yeah.
The Stone Roses were at 20 with Made of Stone, and the Stone Roses were also at 25 with Elephant Stone.
Right.
So it was a bit of a Manchester loving.
We just missed out on the like a few weeks previous to that, or maybe a month or so, I can't remember, but there was a famous Top of the Pops where the Roses and the Mondays, I think, appeared for the first time. It was the first time the Manchester bands had been on Top of the Pops. And what had happened, funnily enough, before that even, when we released Move, I think it's Move got to number 41 in the charts. If it had got to number 40, we would have been on Top of the Pops, like, way before the Roses and the Mondays. So we just missed out on being that first Manchester band to get on there, you know what I mean? But no, it's just great to be part of it. It's great that because the Madchester scene happened, and because somebody called it Madchester with a D, suddenly it made our ascent a lot quicker, because we were part of this bigger thing. It wasn't just about a psychedelic band from Oldham anymore. It's like we were part of this big Manchester thing that the world was just gobbling up, you know. So it sped everything up in a really nice way. We became part of this big family. You know, there's a real good camaraderie between all those bands you just mentioned and I mentioned. And it's still the same to this day. I'm still in touch with all these people, and still a lot of love and a lot of great memories. There was never really a lot of competition, I would say.
With regards to that time, the race to the G-Mex, every James, the Happy Mondays and yourself all sold out the G-Mex. Was that just one promoter that came up with that idea, or was it, as you said, you were friends with the bands, did you all sit in a pub one night and go, let's play the G-Mex?
I can't remember who did it first. I think the Mondays might have done it first. And then we got offered, I think James was going to do it, and we got offered the support with James at G-Mex. And we said, no, we'll headline it ourselves. And I think the key man at the time was Simon Brown, who was fairly new on the promoting scene. FGM concert season, one of the most influential men in British music at the moment. But he was in Manchester putting gigs on at the university. And we went to him and said, will you promote this gig for us at the G-Mex? Which he did. And it sold out. This was July 1990, 21st of July 1990. And we sold out, like, I think it was 11,000, 12,000 capacity. The support, I think we got a Lars to support us, who were, you know, they weren't very successful at the time, but we all loved them. And it was just a beautiful homecoming moment. And it was the first time my mum and dad had seen us play live as well, that G-Mex gig. So I think for the first time there, my dad realised I wasn't wasting my time here. You know, he used to say to me about when are you going to get a proper job? You should think about that to it, you know what I mean? I used to like get out with them, Chadderton, being the rest of the Inspiral. I think that night, though, in July 1990, when my dad was up on in the stands watching, and I could see him from the stage with a little smile on his face. Everybody's there with their hands in the air singing the songs that I'd written in my bedroom at their house in Oldham. And I think then it was a nice moment for Mum and Dad. I think they realised I was well on the way to not having to do a proper job for a few years. So it was a proud moment for me. We did it again the following year, sold it out again, 1991. I think to an even bigger crowd, I can't remember. But yeah, it's a great place, G-Mex. It's now called Manchester Central. But back then it was GMEX, the Greater Manchester Exhibition Centre, and the equivalent of your NECC pretty much, isn't it?
Aye, definitely. You mentioned the lads. There's a lovely picture came up on Twitter recently, Clint, with yourself, I think, Noel Gallagher and Lee Mavers. And I remember you saying that there was something about the Scouse whereby the music was in them from kind of birth. What's your kind of take on that? Because obviously we're huge Laz fans, Edgar Summertime, Mick Head, all these kind of guys.
Yeah. It's funny, I still say it a lot and I still believe it. Like, I wasn't born to make music. You know, I was infected by the music book from first hearing it as a kid. I loved it and I fancied doing it, but I had to work to try and play an instrument. I still do. I'm still not a fluent keyboard player, despite what people think about it. I tried guitar and couldn't really do it. And I love guitars. I get excited when I look at electric guitars, but I've never really tried playing one, you know, since I was a kid. But with the Scousers, it just seems that it's in them from day one, and it's in them from birth. You know, you give a 6-month-old Scouse baby an acoustic guitar or the ukulele, and it'll knock a tune out. You know, I think Manx have to work a little bit harder at it. I don't know why that is, but it's probably something to do with the geography, something to do with the Irish in the Scouts. You know, there's more music there than there is here. I mean, Manchester is still, to me, it's still the most important music city in the world ever in terms of the records that we've made and the bands we've put out there. You know, still, I'd rather be here than anywhere in the world for the music. But yeah, the Scouts is they're born to make music, and it's a biological thing. I don't know what it is, but one day scientists will bottle it. It was all somewhere. You know what I mean?
You talk about musical geniuses, and you worked with Marquis Smith, who recently passed away. Now I know he was one of your heroes. You appeared on Top of the Pops with Marquis Smith. Have you got any stories about Marquis Smith?
I could probably write a book. The time I spent with him, I could probably write a book. You know, coupled with my obsession with the film from the moment I first saw them.
Anybody that's a Fall fan seems to be an obsessive. I don't think you can just be. I don't think you can just like the Fall. You have to be madly in love with the Fall.
Yeah, or absolutely detest them.
Yes.
Yeah, I was the other side of it. I was completely inspired by the Fall, mesmerised, you know, by Mark Smith since the moment I saw him, because he arrived. I first saw him. I think it was the last night of the Electric Circus. I think it might have been sometime in early 1978. And punk was, you know, it was all about the ripped clothes, the slogans on your shirts, and you know, people were still spitting and poking. And then suddenly you had this band from Prestwich. The singer I think he had a red satin shirt on the first night, so and like, you know, really well ironed trousers, black trousers with seams down the front, creases already ironed them, shiny shoes. I just thought, fucking hell, man, look at this. He don't give a fuck. You know? It was just punky in terms of the sound and, you know, the energy and the attitude. It was as punky as the Sex Pistols or the Clash or anything else that had gone on. But it just looked different. They looked like kids off our street. You know, like kids that worked in the bank. And something about it really appealed to me. It was just, you can be a punk, but you can be smart at the same time. And that appealed to me. But just the melody of the songs are so poppy. You know, they were very poppy. The original chapter of the Fall songwriting, you know, like A Student and Industrial Estate and Rebellious Jukebox and Repetition. They're just beautiful, quirky pop songs, you know, but they were punk at the same time, so that appeals to me.
His lyrics are fantastic as well. His lyrics are
just unique. There's never been a right to like it, and there probably won't ever be a right to that'll say what he said in the same kind of phraseology and terms. And you know, over time, they were my favourite band. Over time, I got to know Mark because we had offices in the same building, if I remember rightly, at one point. And I'd be like just awestruck that Mark Smith was just in the corridor. I saw Mark Smith going down there. And then one day he called me and said, I really like your band. And I was like, you look like Seeds, aren't you? You're on Seeds, and that's a good thing. And I don't like those other Manchester bands, but I like you a lot. And he was that vocal about, you know, his love of us. That was amazing for me. We became friends, and eventually on one of the Inspiral albums we decided, instead of doing remixes of tracks, which was the big thing at the time, we decided to do some alternative versions where we'd do collaborations with some of our favourite artists. And I think we did one track with Peter Hook, we did one track with Basil Clark from the band called Yardmore, and I made the call to Mark Smith saying, do you fancy come and do a bit of a collaboration on alternative versions of some album tracks? And that's how that came about. He did I Want You, and he did Saturn 5. There's a version of Saturn 5 of Mark Smith singing it.
Oh, brilliant.
And it's online, it'll be on Spotify somewhere, but we never made a big thing of it.
I've never heard that.
I've never heard that either.
Yeah, and then working with it was always, there was always that part of me that was like, this is one of my all-time musical icons, but there was another part that was like, it could be so horrible to people, you know what I mean? Unfortunately, it was never really that horrible to me, but the night we went down to London to the top of the Prox, so we checked into the hotel. He had the girl on the reception in tears within minutes because he's so cantankerous with her, you know what I mean?
Shouldn't laugh.
You shouldn't laugh, no.
I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't take away 1 minute at the time with him. It was just, it's an amazing thing to experience, and we created something beautiful with the music that he did with the Inspirals.
Mm-hmm.
He did a little thing with me on stage in a venue in London. He got on stage and did the Stooges, I Want to Be Your Dog with the Clint Boon.
Oh, brilliant.
Completely unrehearsed. I didn't even know it was coming. He just turned up in between the set and the encore and said, that was a good gig, that was a good gig. I said, fancy getting up with me, what? I said, alright, what should we do? And I said, do you know the Stooges? I Want to Be Your Dog. He was like, yeah, let's do it, come on. And he just banged it. Have you heard it? That version?
I've never heard it, but I'll be looking for it.
Again, easy to get hold of. It's on YouTube. It's a good experience. I Want to Be Your Dog, Mark Smith. I was sad that he went. I knew he was poorly. But yeah, it's tragic that he's not here, but you know what, he was here forever. The funny thing is, just before you phoned me, or just before we spoke today, I was actually going through all my fall vinyl albums, 12-inch, all my CDs. I'm just logging them all. The Inspirals are currently swapping lists with each other about what fall records we've got. So we can share with you, because he made there was 40 albums for me by the fall. There's a lot of those I had still not got. So. But that's what I was doing immediately before talking to you today. I was going through all the fall collection and writing it down, which is a funny thing to be doing at my age. But
it's great. Yeah.
I've still got that bug. I'm still obsessive and still mesmerised about Mark and his music.
We used one of the covers of the albums as a parody for one of our flyers, Clint. The 50,000 Fall Fans Can't Be Wrong. It was the compilation. So we've used that.
That was a parody of an Elvis.
Yeah. It's still a parody of a parody for our podcast.
I think with us doing this podcast, one of Mark's famous quotes is, if you're going to play it out of tune, play it out of tune well, and that's what we kind of do with this podcast.
I hope so. The other story I wanted to bring up, Clint, because it had me in stitches when I heard you telling it. I read the Morrissey book. I thought it was fantastic. Every page was poetically written and it was just brilliant. But one thing that struck me about it was his story where he was spooked on the moors on the way back from a gig by some spectre in the field. And you believe that it might not have been a ghoul or a ghost. What's the story with that?
One night, back in the late 80s, we did a gig in Sheffield, Inspirals. We drove over a road called the Snake Pass, which is a road that links Madchester or Glasgow with Sheffield. And it's a really high bit of moorland. It's very barren, it's scary, it's desolate. Not the kind of place you're going to break down. And on the way back from this gig, we were supporting James at a gig in Sheffield, and on the way back it was so dark up on the Snake Pass, and I just said to the driver, just pull over, we'll have a bit of a laugh here, because there's big mounds of soil at the side of the road, like maybe workmen had been working on some drainage or something, but there's big piles of soil. And I got out and I told the driver to drive on, come back in 3 minutes and pick me up, whatever. And Craig, the drummer guy, did the same. And we both stood on these, like I was on one mound of soil, Craig was about 30 yards down on the next one, in total darkness, in crucifix positions, waiting for the first car to come along, which it did, and then obviously slowed down to see what was going on. We jumped forward and they drove off. And this happened, like 2 or 3 different cars did this. And I remember for one, the last one, I definitely jumped forward and reached out towards the car as they pulled over and shot off into the distance. Now that really happened, and these fellas know that happened, there's witnesses. But when I read the Morrissey book, was actually Craig that flagged over. Craig phoned me up and said, have you read that book by Morrissey? And he said, I think we're in it. And then I read it and I thought, it's not exactly the detail that I've just told you about our story, but the way that over the years, if you've got a story, I remember, it does change.
It does.
When you write the book, you might just fill in a few gaps.
In my case, it usually gets better.
Embellish it.
The fact that, Morrissey said he was riding with friends in his car. At that time, Morrissey was travelling around to James gigs. He was watching James.
That's right.
They were his favourite band, and wherever he could, he'd go with them to watch them. And I'm convinced that not convinced, I think there's a good chance that he was on his way back from hanging out with James in Sheffield on the moors when his horse doing what he did.
That damaged him. That damaged him for about 40 years, Clint, that experience.
Blame me for Morris's mental condition. I'm a big fan of his music, and I've never really had a chance to meet him personally. I like being a fan of his music. I don't always agree with things I see him saying in the press or in the media, but I like being the consumer that just enjoys his tunes,
Mm-hmm. Now, Clint, what we'd like to do is, if you've got any charity events or anything that you're supporting, I know that you have been a big charity fundraiser for Luna Bliss, and is there anything that you want to mention that we can put out to our listeners to hopefully get a few donations, etc.?
The work that we did for the baby unit at the St Mary's Hospital, that was because we lost our baby Luna Bliss, obviously. So we over the years done a lot of things to raise money for that. I think more recently, I think what's gone on in Manchester over the last year is worth people putting money into, the Manchester Emergency Fund. It's, I don't think there'll ever be enough money put into that to do what needs to be done and to help people's lives get back on track. But I would say that's still the one that you should be looking at and putting money into. And it's easy to find online, but it's not just that 22 people died, 22 people or 22 families lost close ones. It's the injuries, the amount of injuries and the mental problems it's caused for a whole community of people is just profound. It's massive, and no amount of money will ever put things right. I think every penny will help somebody somewhere to get back on track. So that's the one. That's the Manchester Emergency Fund.
Nice one.
The arena victims.
Nice one. Because we're all for trying to raise awareness of different funds, etc. And the story of your daughter was just, it was really touching and heartbreaking to hear that, especially when you were telling me about a friend of yours who wrote the song, and you played a wee snippet of the song.
Yeah, that was an amazing thing, because that was Mike Gary, a friend of ours, is a poet. He did a poem for Luna's funeral, which was gorgeous, and a couple of years later, just right out of the blue, you've got to understand this, my first musical icon was Elvis Presley, my second one was Marquis Smith, and then my third one, a bit after that, my next icon was Philip Glass. And Philip Glass is a modern day avant-garde composer, if you want to use that phrase, but lives in New York, he's probably in his 70s now, and he's just, an absolute god in my mind, with the music that he's made and over the years. Somehow Mike Gary, a friend of the poet, ended up doing a gig in New York with Philip Glass. They became great friends and then started doing more and more gigs together, and then a couple of years ago I got a message from Mike's wife saying we're in Amsterdam with Philip Glass and we're about to perform the poem that Mike did for Luna. It's called Live Forever, with Philip Glass playing piano on it. I'm like, fucking hell, man, that's pretty special, and that's what the clip is that you heard on the podcast. And again, I think it's online. I think if you go on YouTube, I'm pretty sure that there's a video clip of them playing it. I don't know what the title is, but the song's called Live Forever, and it features Philip Glass and Mike Gary with the 2 R's in it.
It's beautiful.
But yeah, when I saw that, I was just like one of the most special things I've ever seen in my life. Like a great friend of mine and one of my musical heroes was doing a song for our sadly departed daughter. It was just a beautiful moment.
It was.
It's quite goosebumpy.
Definitely. Well, it got me going as well, Clint. I'd love to thank you for joining us today. You're talking about icons, and Kevin and I are massive fans of yourself and all of the different artists that you've mentioned today. So it's a great thrill for us to speak to you, get people like yourself, you know.
It's one of these things, Clint. I grew up with Inspiral Carpets 13, 14. I copied Tom's haircut. I wore the bag of clothes.
I had Clint's haircut. I did.
You were one of the bands one of the early bands I went to see. The first two bands I went to see at the Barrowlands, I've told this story on the pod before, was the first band I went to see was James, and the next band I went to see at the Barrowlands was yourselves. And this was just, you had just released Dragging Me Down, and I had to Google this. I knew it was in February 1992, but Celtic played Dundee United on the night before your gig at the Barrowlands, and at the time it was Old Terracing. I slipped down the terracing and cracked a bone in my ankle, so I was determined to go to the Inspiral's gig the following night, so I went with crutches. Now, I don't know if you've ever heard of how strict the Barrowlands bouncers were for...
Yeah, I know the reputation.
Especially when I was 15 at the time and looked about 8. So this wee guy turning up with a set of crutches, obviously underage, there was no chance I was getting into the gig. The bouncers just weren't having it. So I went round the back of the Barrowlands, which now I'm a bit older, that was probably quite dangerous going round the back of the Barrowlands, because what happens behind the back of the Barrowlands. And I got speaking to a roadie, and the support bands that night for you were Airhead and the Frank and Walters.
Yeah.
And I got speaking to the roadie from the Frank and Walters, and just as the Inspirals came on stage, 2 bouncers opened the fire exit and let me in on this wee roadie's say-so. So I hobbled up the stairs, saw your set, a great set. You had the big white balloons, eh? That was your stage set. So yeah. When you were doing the last song, my memory escapes me, I can't remember what the last song was. I decided before 2,000 people left the Barrowlands, I would have to get down these stairs on my crutches. And yous were fantastic that night, but the best bit of that night was when I hopped down the stairs, the 2 bouncers that didn't let me in seen me. Their faces were an absolute picture, and I can't repeat the industrial language that they called me and used as I hobbled down the stairs. That was a great night. Also saw you later on that tour in Edinburgh, the Queen's Hall in Edinburgh. Yeah. The old church. I'm sure...
That's one of the first gigs we did in Scotland, supporting the wedding present in that venue.
Brilliant.
Back in probably 1987, 88. So I think it was our first ever Scottish gig, that venue.
It's a beautiful venue, the Queen's Hall. Did you not say it was the coldest you've ever been at a gig?
The coldest?
Yes.
I can't remember. Did I say that on stage?
No, I think he says it on Twitter a couple of years later. He says that it was the coldest you had ever been.
I can't remember that, but...
It's an old disused church. It's a good venue.
I didn't say that it was the coolest I've ever been.
Well, could have been.
Talking about coolest, was it your idea to come up with the Inspiral Carpets t-shirts?
Pretty much, yeah, because I started doing I had the cow photographs before I joined the Inspirals. I had all these pictures of cows, these transparencies. And when I joined the Inspirals, I started putting together a psychedelic light show with oil lights and smoke machines and bubbles. And I started projecting pictures behind us at gigs. And a lot of these pictures were cow pictures that I'd taken, because I used to live in a house where the backyard backed onto a cow's field, so there's always cows looking at me, so I was always getting a funky picture of cows. So people started moving at gigs when they started moving. And then eventually I thought that's got to be our trademark logo, so I drew a cartoon version of it with the spirally eyes. And our first ever television show was for Anthony Wilson, put us on a programme called The Other Side of Midnight. And we did it as an instrumental because our singer at the time, Stephen, had just left and we hadn't replaced him yet. And so Tony said, well, come and do an instrumental. We did this instrumental version of Directed Traffic. And for the TV show, I made my own t-shirt. I made an Inspirals. I put a cow on the front of a black t-shirt, using that squeezy paint. They used to call it puffy paint. You squeeze it on and then you'd iron it and it bubbled up into a three-dimensional image. So I made a little cow for this TV show, and then people started saying, I want one of them shirts like you've got to have made a few. And it grew from there, really. It's just that going back to that sort of that little working class thing we talked about at the beginning, that we just made that into a little industry to get some money in from that. So for a while we were financing everything on the proceeds of our t-shirt sales, the cow shirts. And then in time I developed it into the coolest fuck version. And it's again a very popular shirt and one of the most bootlegged t-shirts of all time, I think. You still see a lot of them now, but they're not ones that we make anymore. I think people are just buying them on the internet and that. So, but again, it's like it's out there. It's got a life of its own.
It's one of the defining images, isn't it, from the whole Madchester era? Is that cow?
I bought one of those t-shirts that night at the Barrowlands. So to add an extra layer to the picture that I described, a scrawny 15-year-old with a cool as fuck t-shirt hopping down the stairs at the Barrowlands on crutches.
You said it was a back staircase?
The back staircase, I came up out the
stage?
Yes.
Because that one of my memories of Barrowlands was when I had the Clint Boon experience there, so a few years later I had a band called the Clint Boon Experience. And we did a gig at Barrowlands, and back then, to load the gear, they put it at the bottom of that stairwell on a pallet that was on the end of a crane, and they used to hoist all the gear up the middle of the stairwell. Do you remember that?
I do. There's a podcast recently with the sound men from Mogwai, and that's what they were mentioning about the Barrowlands, having to humph the gear up the stairs.
Yeah, well they did, and in the middle of the stairwell was like a hoist and a big long row with a pallet on the bottom, and they used to pile all the amps on and crane it up. And they managed to drop the entire Clint Boon Experience backline equipment once when this crane failed, the rope snapped and the lot went crashing down. So I remember that, but we still managed to do the gig, funnily enough.
Superb.
Nice Memories is still my favourite venue in the world. I was talking to Jim Kerr from Simple Minds a couple of weeks ago. We got talking about Barrowlands because they've got a song on their new album called Barrowland Star. Which is inspired by a Barrowland story.
Yeah.
It involves David Bowie as well, funnily enough. But I was saying to him, it's still, when anybody asks me about my favourite venue anywhere in the world, it's still Barrowland is the one that I say. Barrowlands that's a big one. And I think most bands from Manchester would say exactly the same. Not just your favourite Scottish venues, it's favourite venue anywhere in the world, favourite memories.
It's one of the only venues in Scotland that I'll still buy tickets for. Doesn't matter who's there. If I even got a passing interest in the band, if they're playing a gig at the Barrowlands, I'll go, because there's always that possibility it's going to be magical just because of the venue. You mentioned Jim Kerr. Obviously Jim's a big massive Celtic fan as well.
Yeah.
And you know the Happy Mondays as well.
Yeah.
Would the Happy Mondays ever admit to liking Simple Minds? Because they do sound, a lot of the Happy Mondays early stuff does sound like early Simple Minds.
I think they totally wore that influence on the sleeve and said, yeah, that was part of it.
Wow.
It's funny, Simple Minds, because they've been sort of, I said, not out of fashion, they've been out of the public eye for many years, but I think there's never been a time when it's been uncool to say like Simple Minds. Back in the day, in the 80s, we all loved them. And since then, whenever I play them on the radio quite a lot. So I don't think they've ever really gone out of fashion. They might have gone out of the media spotlight here and there, but I don't think they've ever become unfashionable. I think even in the way that U2, there's been times that U2 have been not a great name to drop. I mean, they've always been a great rock band, but there's been times when you won't go out and say, I love U2, mate. I think Simple Minds have always been a cool band who made some of the most, majestic music of all time. Simple as that. And the new album is as majestic as anything they've ever created, I think.
I'm going to have to try and get Jim onto this show, I think, Clint.
Definitely.
Listen, Clint, to get an hour with yourself has been a phenomenal insight for Kevin and I, and we can't thank you enough.
Just tell you something funny, while we've been talking, because I said to my wife, I'm going to go somewhere quiet now to do this interview for this podcast, and since we've been talking, our window cleaner came, and he's got one of these, they don't do it on ladders anymore, do they, for health and safety reasons? He's got these really long poles with a bush on the end of it and an hose pipe. And as I've been talking to you, he's He's come to every room I've been talking. I've had to leave the room. The noise of the windows.
Followed you around.
I've got like a little room at the back of the house, it's like a little office. I'm not sat on the floor in the little office room at the back of the house. But, you know, it's all in there, we're doing good podcasting.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've enjoyed talking to you, it's been brilliant.
Well, all the best.
Keep up the good work. Enjoy the rest of the day, and I look forward to hearing the podcast.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
And we'll send you a link, Clint, but thank you for your time. We really appreciate it.
It's been an absolute pleasure.
Take care.
Cheers, mate.
Take care now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Putting it down to another bad day. Daddy don't know what he's done. Kids don't know what's wrong with mom. So this is how it feels to be lonely. This is how it feels to be small. This is how it feels when your word means nothing at all.
Thank you to Clint Boon for taking the time to be a guest of A Celtic State of Mind. A Celtic State of Mind's previous episodes can be accessed by searching iTunes, Spreaker or your pre-installed podcast player. Make sure to subscribe and you won't miss our upcoming episodes with former players, documentary directors, actors and supporters. You can keep up to date with us on Twitter at Paul Dykes, at A Northern Pros and at Celtic Star Pod. Visit thecelticstar.com for daily news, features, pre and post match reaction and 100% Celtic content. And thank you all for listening and downloading the show. Feel free to leave your comments on iTunes and Spreaker or just tweet us directly. Join us again next week. We will be back alongside another special guest with A Celtic State of Mind.